You've ever heard someone say, I don't see color, or our domestic worker is part of the family, then my next guest wants you to listen up. While statements like that don't necessarily mean any harm, they can still hurt. Joshua Cox started the Racial Literacy Project for white people who want to equip themselves to speak out on issues of race and equality with confidence. He says that white people choose to stay silent for fear of offending further. But then it's getting them nowhere. Joshua joins us now for help on how we can get the conversation moving forward. Josh, I want to start off with something that I read on your site, that there is a misconception about the meaning of racism. Talk to me about that misconception and how it may mislead people into thinking that that racism is just about intentional acts of racism.
Yeah, morning, Tafuma. Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of the challenge when it comes to discussion on race and racism is we tend to miss each other in terms of what our understanding of racism is. And a lot of people hold the belief that racism is intentional acts of harm by white people against black people, when in fact it's an issue that's much broader than that. You know, it's inherent in, so institutional racism is something that's quite different from individual racism, and that's really about systems and norms of society that fundamentally benefit white people, and a lot of how that plays out in terms of people's behavior can result in unintentional acts that cause harm towards black people. So there's this sort of good-bad binary where people who commit racist acts must be intentionally out there to harm people. These must be bad people, and yet a lot of the behaviors that are actually associated with the system of racism are not intentional and not necessarily linked to a particular individual.
And that unintentional hurt is manifest in, say, statements like I mentioned earlier, like, I don't see color. So let's talk about that one, for example. Why would a statement like that cause unintentional harm?
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, I think a lot of people love to refer to Martin Luther King's speech around, not judging people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And it's usually meant with very good intentions to say that, I don't judge people as being good or bad based on the color of their skin. So often it comes with a very good intention. What it serves to do unintentionally is that it denies the fact that black people living in South Africa and in fact around the world have a very different lived experience compared to white people. And there's a lot of pain that is associated with that lived experience. And so when we deny that, then it avoids the issue and we're not able to deal with it.
There's lots of statements like that on your website, Josh. I want to talk about just one more, which is the one where you say, a lot of people say, well, my domestic worker is like family to me. And that's meant with kindness, I think.
Absolutely. I think that is usually a very kind statement, and I think it refers to the affection that people have, for a domestic worker who is spending a lot of time in their home, is maybe looking after their children, and I want to take nothing away from that. But I do think it's a little bit of a misguided statement. Our family are our family regardless of how they behave. There's nothing that they can do to not become our family. Whereas domestic worker, there are certain expectations that they have to live up to in terms of turning up for work, doing a good job and so on. And if they fail to do those, then the relationship would end. So I think it's a bit misleading and a little bit misguided to say that a domestic worker is like your family. And I think the importance of that is that when we need to be aware of that, because when we are asking things who works in our home that might be an unreasonable request, we might think that they
unfortunately we've lost
job. So I think it's good to have that awareness.
Unfortunately, we're losing signal. It's a bad connection with Joshua, probably load shedding where he is as well. But it's a very important website for you to visit. Visit racialliteracy.co.za. And I know there'll be people rolling their eyes right now, people saying, I'm not a racist, I don't need to go to this website. But you need to go there so you can get an education. And there might be things you are saying and you don't realize that they could cause harm.
I think one of the main issues is disqualifying an experience that's not shared. So if somebody in the office says, I've experienced racism with trying to rent somewhere, and you say, oh, but I've never experienced, there's no racism. How would you know? You're white. You wouldn't have experienced racism or anti-Semitism or whatever it is. And I think to discount color, I mean, you and I, for instance, I mean, I know that you're black and you know that I'm white, but it doesn't have any impact on our friendship.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that we still don't live different experience or haven't had different lived experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's part of it, but it's a great website.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out.